So the next topics that we're going to talk about are government overreach, and specifically, I separated government overreach from federal overreach and state overreach, uh, because I feel like these are huge issues right now that are going on in our country. The number one, the federal government, I feel has very, very strong hand in a lot more, a lot more, a lot stronger than what the founding fathers had originally planned to happen. I feel like the federal government has a lot stronger hand than they should have, and it's reaching into our state and affecting us. And when I look to a leader of our state, I want somebody who is willing to fight and stand up for our state rights, and in turn then fights for our county rights and our individual rights as people of the United States. And then the second part is government overreach on the state level. Um, I don't want somebody who is going to be a tyrant and or like a tyrant and use their authority or power to control or to coerce um, into how they feel things should be. That goes against republicanism. Again, if we look at that, republicanism, freedom from arbitrary interference, freedom from a government that practices preferential or nonsensical power over its people. So, federal government's already doing that. I don't want the state government to also be doing that. Spencer Cox, when we looked at this already when we talked about housing, but one of the things he has done is he has threatened local communities, local municipalities, and counties. He's given them 1 year to make progress on less expensive starter homes. He wants them to rezone areas so that they can make it easier for um, developers to build these starter homes, these smaller starter homes, which sounds good. I mean, that I have nothing against building more starter homes. It's the thing that I have the issue with is not his idea, again, how he wants to implement it and the air he brings as governor to that. It's like I said before, it feels a little threatening to me. So, um, one of the issues that I had mentioned earlier came from a county council member in Tooele about affordable housing and the effect that it will have on Tooele County being forced with affordable housing via taking away certain um, benefits and taxes, pretty much saying that there's strings attached to their benefits that they can get if they do these affordable housing. But if they do that, they're going to have hyper growth and grow a lot more than they can. So it feels a lot more like it's trying to have centralized power, the state is, when it comes to housing, rather than trying to rely on the help of municipalities and counties. And that's a concern for me. Like, I think this is a good idea, and I don't think I'd have too much of an issue with it if I didn't feel like there was more power that was trying to be exercised against these communities and counties. Anyways, another thing that we had talked about was HB 61. What it is? yeah, HB 61, the water metering. He wants to set up a system that reports our water use to the state, to the governor's office, pretty much, because he created the state water engineer who will be reading these, and the state will have the information that will read all of our personal water usage, which scares me a little bit because it seems a little more, it's a little bit more or less privacy into our lives and a little bit more government than I feel comfortable having. So, as of right now, if you remember me talking about it, the governor, the governor's lieutenant governor, is in charge of elections. The governor has said that he wants to um, appoint school board members. And you know what? It's in this video. If you watch this video, that he says he is interested in appointing school board
I
members.
promise you that I will get you back to your...
But he has also said, and we're not going to watch that. You guys can watch that. I'll send the link. He said he's interested in the governor being the one to appoint school board members rather than us voting for them. So it takes away, or it consolidates some power to the governor's office. And he's also said he's interested in appointing, not electing, so us not electing an attorney general. This one is a scary one because I feel attorney general is and can be a check on all the different aspects of the government, the legislature, the judicial, and the executive, and to the people too, to a point. But if a governor is the one appointing an attorney general, it has a little bit more of a incentive for the attorney general to do what he wants, and then also if he can appoint, he can also fire. So the attorney general will be a little bit more of a, not a lapdog. I can't think of the analogy, but I think you understand what I'm saying. He'll be beholden to the governor a little bit more, and that is scary. Not necessarily that I think Cox would pick bad ones for either the board or the attorney general, but if we set that precedent, if we get a bad governor in office, who's to say they are going to appoint a good one? I feel like this, us electing them, an attorney general and the school board, is another checks and balance. And wanting to appoint that is not. That is not republicanism. Checks and balances. This one you can also watch the video. This is the secondary sources I was telling you where you have to watch the video because they do an interview where the governor specifically says it, and that right there is the primary source. So I will send these links. Gosh dang it. And you guys can watch it and see for yourselves. The last thing I want to bring up when it comes to government overreach on the state level is the fact that, excuse me, that Spencer Cox has grown the executive branch in Utah by a good amount. You know what? I'm going to play this real quick by Phil Lyman because he claims that the federal government has grown by, or not the federal, sorry, the executive branch has grown by from 200 employees to 800 employees over the past 4 years. 147. So I'm gonna have you guys listen to that real quick. There's another thing to it as well that I wanted to point out. Let's go and listen to that.
impact from COVID if their own decisions. Such a smart way to govern. To
Well,
say,
it's the way we're set up. We're supposed to have our
it's just
freedom.
like start pulling out of people's lives, and if the state would start, trimming back, pulling out of people's lives, you see the costs go down. I think it'd be so cool to be the first executive office in probably Utah's history that doesn't just stop growing, exponentially, but actually cuts the executive branch by 30%. You could do it at state level. I'm confident because it's grown by 50% just in the last 4 years.
Yeah. So you added 12,000 jobs or something, government jobs, or
Utah, that includes federal and everything else, but Utah itself has added amazing amounts in the executive branch, from 200 employees to about 800 employees in the executive office branch. That includes.
So I haven't been able to find that exactly, but the point of sharing that was to show you that he claims that, but then also that he personally wants, when he's governor, to reduce the size of the executive branch. So here are some of the examples of the positions that Cox has created since he's been in. He's created the Housing Innovation Advisor. Governor Cox announces a new position within the governor's office to coordinate statewide housing policy. The Housing Innovation Advisor will work with stakeholders from local government, the building community, and state agencies to develop a comprehensive strategy for tackling the state's housing supply and affordability challenges. So that's that Utah First Homes program that we have talked about. Okay. He has also created Equity and Inclusion Accelerator. This one, I believe you also want to. Actually, let's go ahead and listen to it.
I promise you that I will get.
We don't want to watch ads. So you can watch that, and there's a picture that shows it. Equity and Inclusion Accelerator, the Department of Human Resources Management. So you guys can look that up. He's also created Director of Immigration and New American Integration position. He's created Senior Advisor on Equity and Opportunity. And Diversity. Oh, wait, no, that's not. The Diversity and Inclusion Commission. So you guys can watch that one too. So those are just a few examples over the past few years of how he's grown the executive branch in Utah. And let's go ahead and look at some of the ideas that Phil Lyman has for the state government. We watched some of this before. Excuse me. But they asked a question about how he would deal with the legislature. So let's go ahead and see what he says.
If someone wanted to go from 203 to 129 quickly, safely, effectively, but
if you wear glasses or contacts, you must see this.
Sorry, I thought
An
I had
award-winning doctor reveals an
Sorry, I swear I had this set up beforehand. Okay, 2858.
Finances. As a legislator, I would. As
things out for a minute, because proper role of government is important. You are currently a legislator right now, and a legislator's role is to craft legislature, which is going to govern our state. But your role as governor, alternatively, is very different. So why don't you explain broadly what difference it is going from being a legislative position to a governor's position.
Right. You know, that's my dad used to say, differences make a difference. And Governor Cox recently said he was going to run legislation to do something. It's like, oh, you don't run legislation. What he meant was, I'm going to get a legislator to run this legislation, and I'm going to tell leadership that I want it to pass, and it's going to pass without any opposition because that's the influence that they have. A year or two ago, he credited Deidre with running election legislation. It's like, well, she's not a senator anymore. She's now the lieutenant governor. So legislators legislate. They're the lawmakers. They make the laws. And what happens right now too often is they make laws that have kind of a general feel to it. They hand it over to the executive branch and say, let the rule makers figure this out and make rules. So the Department of Health or whomever it is, they take that and they just, it's like, oh, it's you know, whatever we want. We've got a blank check, and they start making rules. And I would veto those bills. If they come and they're saying we're going to just hand this over to the legislative branch, I say, go back and do your job, legislature. I want a strong legislature. I want legislators who want to legislate, and leadership that wants to empower the body, not to concentrate the power in the leadership. And right now it's too concentrated between the governor and the president of the Senate and the Speaker of the House, and then some of the powerful, moneyed interests in the state.
One of the problems.
So he's saying right now, the executive branch, because when he's talking about the Department of Health, and he gives that example, that is part of the executive branch. That is underneath the governor, the governor's office. So when laws are passed, he's saying when laws are passed right now through the legislature, they are vague, and they rely on these departments underneath the executive branch to essentially interpret and have a blank check in how these laws are interpreted, giving a lot more power to the executive branch. So Phil is saying he wants to empower the legislature by saying if those kind of bills come across his desk, he's going to say, no, this is not okay. Go back and do your job as legislatures and make the law and make it clear. So, and to go along with those lines, in that town hall meeting in Twilla, go ahead and have a listen.
As far as like the infrastructure out here, someone asked me this about public lands. You know, well, if the state was going to manage public lands, they don't have the resources to do that. How could they ever handle that? And I say, oh, we've got these really great little things called counties that are designed to do exactly that. I would love to see Tooele County have more resources. And I saw this as a county commissioner myself. It's like we have all the responsibility, none of the control, and none of the resources to do what we need to. And then the state sits back and kind of watches us struggle with these things. I would love to see those resources allocated more aggressively to the counties themselves to address those issues locally. And there's some really challenging issues that I'm sure would require. It's like you didn't create.
So as you can see, Phil not only wants to restore the branches of government to their proper lanes, but he wants to restore all forms and levels of government to their proper lane. Now let's move on to federal overreach, federal government overreach.